everyone, welcome to our channel. I'm Kate.
And I'm Stephanie.
And together with you, we're Three Heads. Today we're talking classroom management at the high school level. It could probably work at the middle school, but it's definitely geared toward the high school classroom. How do you get those disruptive behaviors under control? And how do you sort of cherry pick what merits your attention and what doesn't merit your attention? Because that can be really hard, especially if you work in a school like us where you had 35 to 40 students in a classroom at one time.
And you're tired of yelling, and you're learning that detentions are really just a way to punish yourself more, and why do I want to spend more time with you after school? I sure don't.
I mean, I'm going to be here anyway, but let me tell you, it will be more enjoyable without you here in trouble. So the way that we came up with handling this was a positive and negative participation system. It's much more complicated than it is to explain than it is to execute in practice. Executing it in practice is super easy.
Super easy, and I think thinking about why we do it, it's just allows you to be so much calmer. Like if they're not listening, I just stand there with my little clipboard and I keep marking off points instead of yelling and getting upset, and I'll wait. I can make minus points all day.
All right, so here is our system. A positive participation point was actually worth 5 points. A negative participation point was worth negative participation point, 1 negative participation point, because we aren't about an eye for an eye here.
If that was the case, we all would have had a negative 437.
So what we wanted students to do was end up with a positive. It was supposed to be an easy way to end up with a positive, and the negative was just supposed to be a reminder. You weren't great, but it wasn't the end of the world.
Yeah.
And so everything that was positive was what you wanted to see in class. So I call on you and you answer the question. It doesn't even have to be the right answer. You just answer in a way that is socially acceptable based on the norms of our classroom. You get your positive participation point.
If you don't know, you say, I don't know, can you help me? And we work it out together.
And then you respond to the prompts that I give you moving forward. That's not a way for you to just rack up positive participation points. You're asking for help and you're going to participate in this process. You get your participation point. A negative participation point goes for those things you don't want to see in class. So when you ask a student a question and they say, what number are we on? That's a negative participation point.
Or just, I don't know.
Yeah, nothing more than that. And I always told my students, I can respect you don't know and you don't want to engage with me about it. That's fine. You get your negative participation point and we'll move on. If you say, I don't know, but as Stephanie gave the example, then you're going to get your positive participation point. So there's motivation for a student who doesn't know to engage with you.
Or I think we even told them, you could say, I don't know, but I'm thinking, and at least put some words out there to make it. Or
I don't know because I'm not understanding, and whatever it is they don't understand. Essentially, anything that engages you with them in a way that creates learning or demonstrates learning is positive. Anything that is not engaging with you or demonstrating learning is a negative.
And we would say other negatives would be students who called out an answer when they weren't called upon, who whispered the answer to another student, or who looked at another student's paper for the answer. Really, we just wanted them to be engaged, pleasant human beings behaving in what Kate called a socially appropriate manner. And if they did, they got their positive points. And if they didn't, they got negative points, which really in a high school classroom, that's the biggest classroom management you have.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, there are some big issues. Those tend to be handled more through the office at the high school level. But really, it's just they're off topic. I was off topic all the time in high school, and so it's finding a way to manage their behavior in the room in a way that is not going to make you pull your hair out.
For sure. And in terms of the students helping students, this is not where you've set up a situation where it's appropriate for them to talk with one another, but where a student is demonstrating their understanding of something. And if they don't know it, you as the teacher want to know that they don't know it. And so them looking at somebody else's paper or the person who sits next to them and feels bad for them telling them the answer is counter to what you're trying to accomplish. So we very often had times where you would talk about your answer with the people at your little pod, and then it's appropriate for you to conference with one another or help one another. But when it's clear that you're trying to elicit a response from this particular student and you want to know if this student on their own understands the idea and they can't produce the answer, then you want to know that so that you can walk them through it and help them to reach an understanding. So it's not like, oh, nobody can help anybody in this classroom. It's every man for himself. It's definitely not like that. It's where you've set it up as you want to know, what does this particular student know?
Yeah, and I think as Kate pointed out earlier, we would usually give them the point if they got the question wrong, though it was helpful sometimes to be like, we've reviewed this every day for the last 17 days. If you get this wrong, I'm taking a point away. Or in an AP discussion, we would say, I've told you 7 times that you need to be more in depth than that. That's a superficial theme that we've talked about, and so it can become a tool in that way as well, because those things can be really disruptive when it's like a refusal to listen or continue to understand what we're doing in class.
Yeah, and high school students definitely get in that routine of like, yeah, I know the answer, but I just don't want to put the effort in to even tell you what the answer is. Well, I'm going to front load this by saying if you don't answer correctly, I'm going to take away your participation point. But that tends to get them buy-in because they're like, I don't want a negative participation point. They don't even care that it's just -1 and a positive is worth 5. No, I don't want any negatives. So,
and it's so funny because it works so well for high school because they don't really care if you yell at them or call home. You probably don't want to waste your time calling home or having them in detention. But they're 17 years old, and you say you're going to get a minus point, they'll do stuff for that. It's crazy how well it works. I feel like I've just tricked you because this is not even affecting your grade, but sure.
It's also an easy way to handle sub-reports and situations with substitutes. Okay, and sometimes I would tell my students, okay, so your name on the sub-report as being disruptive is automatically -5. And so I would say that before anything even happened, before I was even absent, this is going to be the consequence. And it tends to cut down on those behaviors that are just simply the challenging authority. Oh, you're not here today, so I'm going to do whatever I want. Those kind of behaviors that are not problematic behaviors in terms of a student is unable to control themselves and demonstrating this behavior, or there are behaviors that are rooted in other issues. It's boredom behaviors. The boredom behavior is the bane of every high school teacher's existence because it takes so much effort to squash, but it takes them so little effort to produce.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a little bit of a power struggle.
Yeah, and it can become really hostile in a lot of ways that it doesn't need to be, because it's human. Like, I get it. You're in your last class of the day and you're bored and the kid next to you is being obnoxious and it's hot. Like, that, it's hard. But I think also with subs, it's helpful because so often sub reports can turn into like a he said, she said, where you get this horrible sub report and then your students are very upset because they're like, no, you don't understand. That's not what happened. And it just isn't worth the trouble of like arguing about some massive punitive like hour-long detention or referral to the office, because there are sometimes unreasonable subs, and it allows you to say, well, you shouldn't be behaving in any sort of way that would give an adult concern, but you're just losing a couple points, so in the long run it's not a big deal. And so it kind of just lets you give a punishment without having to get into a whole parent conference and going to the office and that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the other thing that is really helpful about it is that participation can be such a subjective part of students' grades. I think increasingly high school teachers are incorporating it as a part of their grades. And yet it can be really just like, I don't know, like, yeah, you did good this month. I'll give you full credit.
Or I think he answered questions.
It's based on attendance or something like that. And so we really liked that this gave us like an actual numerical value that we could say is representative of the way they performed. And even as we moved kind of less discussion based and more with digital learning, we were able to say, okay, well, this Nearpod, like, you don't need like a 50 points for this, but if you did it, you did what you were supposed to this day, so that can be your participation for that day. And so it really just kind of became an objective way to say this student is or is not engaging with what they're supposed to.
For sure. Hopefully you found this to be helpful. Hopefully you can use it to address some of the concerning behaviors that you are seeing in your class. If you have come upon another solution that you think is fantastic, it's working for you, and you want to share it with us, please do so in the comments down below. If you have any questions about how we enacted this in our classrooms and what we shared with our students, be sure to, again, let us know in the comments down below. We'll talk to you soon. Bye!